Please turn to page 5. This particular teaching is called Stages of Mahāmudrā, a message for Gompa Dakpa Dorje. Gompa here, in Judaism's time, it's a secular, it's spelled different from like Gompa, like monastery Gompa. This Gompa here is a secular title for almost like you could say the chieftain. So some sort of chieftain, this Dakpa Dorje. Swasti, a typical start of these texts, it means may it go well. I bow at the feet of the precious Guru, who is the treasury of everything good and the essence of the exalted body, speech, and mind of all Buddhas throughout the 3 times. And so this a little maybe clumsy to add exalted to body, speech, and mind. This is to reflect the difference in Tibetan. In Tibetan, general body, speech, and mind, there are 3. There is one set of words for general body, speech, and mind, which is Lu, Nga, I. Lu is body, Nga, speech, and mind is I, Lu, Nga, I. But then when they are talking about Buddha's body, speech, and mind, they would use Gu, Sung, Tuk. So we would call this the honorific form of those words. English doesn't have honorific forms. I think other Western languages do have, right? I think some other Western languages do have honorific form. But English doesn't have, but Tibetan does have. Yeah? So when it says exalted body, speech, and mind, we know that this is referring to the body, speech, and mind of Buddhas. You are a sublime being. So first, the precious Guru is the essence of the exalted body, speech, and mind of all Buddhas. You are a sublime being with excellent accumulations. This is referring to the 2 accumulations, meaning excellent accumulations here means that perfected the 2 accumulations, which is the accumulation of merit and accumulation of wisdom. In other words, you are a Buddha. Initiated into the teachings of the sage here, the sage, or the Muni, is specifically speaking of Buddha Shakyamuni. So initiated into the teachings of the sage, you now view all the fruits of samsara's joy as being like a poisonous plant. So this is a sublime being who has no more interest in the joys of cyclic existence. He sees this Guru sees all the good goodies in samsara to be like poisonous plants. In another class, we were having this discussion of, or was it here? I don't know. One class we were having this discussion about, oh, I remember now, yes. Another class, Sunday. There was a question of basically along the lines of aren't bodhisattvas supposed to care about confused beings and, so on the one hand, right, bodhisattvas are bodhisattvas because defined by their great care for all beings, and so they are taken the bodhisattva vow, so they are going to be bodhisattvas. Then how do you reconcile also the teachings about the faults of samsara, you know? So basically, I think we need to be clear about that there is no contradiction at all. There's nothing to reconcile. Precisely because we see the faults of samsara, so we don't want our mothers, all sentient beings, to be continuously dragged from lifetime to lifetime through this kind of existence. Right? And more importantly, I think we seem to think, oh, I know, but we don't, it seems. Yeah? And what is this point? Which is this, right? This room is not samsara. Yeah? This room, this spot, for that matter, the next spot over, it's not samsara. Samsara is not a place. Neither is nirvana some other place. You know? Both nirvana and samsara are modes of existence. If you could call nirvana existence, because, you know. But both samsara and nirvana are ways of being. Samsara is the way of being that is under the power of confusion. And all the kleshas that arise from that confusion. Then that becomes samsara. The mere fact of this room is not samsara. So samsara and nirvana are not places, but they are modes of being. So when we say we want to destroy samsara, don't have the wrong idea that, you know, I'm going to blow to smithereen, you know, this. Yeah. When it says we want to destroy samsara, then we're talking about we want to destroy this endless cycle where we have no control. We are thrown, dragged, and thrown around. That's what we want to end, okay? So, as your karmic imprints for devotion awoke, you filled the endless knot of your heart to the brim with the sublime elixir-like teachings of the Buddha. For the benefit of both yourself and others, you may practice your main focus, O Sublime One. So, your karmic imprints for devotion awoke. So here, it appears like the first, the lines that we have covered is the usual introductory paying homage to the Guru. Then this next section seems to be where the instruction starts. Seems like, not very clear. Seems like now is the instruction. So the instruction begins by saying, as your karmic imprints for devotion awoke, begin to stir. So when devotion begins to stir, and it doesn't come from nowhere, it comes from imprints from previous lifetimes. Like maybe some of you, you know, as a child you saw a statue or an image of a Buddha. You have no idea what you're looking at, but you go, oh, I like. So this is the stirring of devotion from karmic imprints. So then you feel your endless knot, the endless knot of your heart. This is a poetic way of saying your heart, to the brim with the sublime elixir-like teachings of the Buddha. For the benefit of both yourself and others, you may practice your main focus, O Sublime One. You have faith in the exalted body, speech, and mind of the precious Guru, our refuge, the Nirmanakaya, meaning the Buddha in person, protector of the world. So here you could say, again, it's not clear, whose words these are. It could be the compiler's words, in which case protector of the world literally is Jigten Sumgen or Jigten Gompo. But this Jigten Gompo, translated as protector of the world, was used by who we now call Jigten Gompo, Jigten Sumgen. He used to address his teacher in this way, Jigten Gompo. And Jigten Gompo, that name is derived from, it's an epithet for Avalokiteshvara, Lord of the world. So in a way, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about Jigten Gompo, Jigten Sumgen, Kyobpa Rinpoche, or we're talking about his teacher. And the point is, you have faith in your precious Guru, your refuge, who is like an actual Buddha. So here, the Nirmanakaya. Because Nirmanakaya is the Buddha form that you and I can see. We don't have to be such advanced beings to actually see the human form of a Buddha. Untainted by a host of words and conceptual fabrications. You have not gone to the marketplace for milk. Do you know this expression? Can you guess this expression?
It's not watered down.
Correct. It's not watered down. You got it right from the cow, that's, right outside your house. Whereas milk from the market, you have no idea, what they're selling you. It harkens back to a time where everybody, that is not like abject poor would have a cow just right outside. You can go out and get your milk, So you have not gone to the marketplace for milk. You've gone to this reliable source, your Guru, for instructions. When longing for the oral instructions of the Sublime Being, first recollect death and impermanence. You could also say this is where the instructions begin. So that the verses all before are just verses of homage. Of course, when I say just, it means not literally just, because in paying homage, what is going on there is the homage describes those qualities. And qualities that we are to look for, and qualities that we are to work on ourselves. When longing for the oral instructions of a Sublime Being, first, yourself, before you go, oh, have I found a Sublime Being or not? Am I getting enough oral instructions from a Sublime Being or not? First, recollect death and impermanence. And then meditate on these with great sincerity. Meditate means get used to the facts of death and impermanence, so that you don't take for granted, basically, for being alive and for having the opportunity to make really good use of being alive. So Dhammapada says, only fools who forget that they will die have time to engage in fighting and bickering and arguing. Think of it almost like, you've been given a death sentence. not so much in prison, right? You've been given a death sentence, and you're free to run around. You're free to do whatever you want, but you've been given a death sentence, right? Would you spend that time fighting and bickering and being petty? It's like, no, I don't have time for that. I have my bucket list, and most people's bucket list doesn't include, being petty. Start an argument. Start an argument on Facebook. Yeah, most people won't put that on their bucket list, So here it's saying, first recollect death and impermanence and meditate on these with great sincerity. If this teaching does not take root in your mind, in your heart, even if you are regarded as an excellent and sublime being, people might admire you because of your title, because of your seeming accomplishments, because it seems like so many people consider you excellent and sublime. In truth, you will only be focused on this world. In truth, you will just continue to be tied to the 8 worldly concerns. And so, my sublime son, having utterly severed your conceptual fabrications as they relate to this world, I ask you to make practice your main focus. Now, obviously, I think all of us are in different circumstances, right? None of us in this group are exactly in the same circumstance as the recipient of this teaching. So that we also need to be aware, You have to go, I wonder what Kyobpa Rinpoche would say to me. And so in that way, we don't need to be so fundamentalist about what we're reading and go, well, there it says. There it says. Well, there it says to this person. Right? Now, which is also, we don't want to then go to the other extreme of not relevant to me immediately. But rather to approach this and say, it's relevant. All of this is relevant to me. And then find its relevance and let its relevance grow. Only in that way, can we really make progress. So your conceptual fabrications that relate to this world, for example, you cannot just pretend, oh, finished, done, not filing my taxes anymore, well, you're only inviting trouble, My kids, oh, who cares, they'll be fine. You can't do that. So you continue to do all those things, but now with a little bit more understanding and hopefully a little bit less neurotic. And that's how we are progressing, a little bit less neurotic. And to be able to chuckle a little bit as we, schlep around doing a whole bunch of drudgery. Don't get carried away. Don't let these things turn into false refuge. See them for what they are, right? Now, if we were in Drapa Dorje's circumstance, then indeed, utterly severed conceptual fabrications as they relate to this world. And I ask you to make practice your main focus. So Drapa Dorje has those circumstances. So maybe this is a retired chieftain. And say, now you're done, So now make practice your main focus. When it comes to time to practice, the foundation of the teachings of all Buddhas throughout the 3 times is the higher training and disciplined conduct. And so the foundations of all practice has to be cultivating this higher training and disciplined conduct. If you do not guard your disciplined conduct as you have promised and vowed, there will be no escape for yourself from the suffering of the lower realms. And you will have deceived all Buddhists because you took those vows, you took those trainings in front of the Buddhists, and you would have deceived them if you don't guard your disciplined conduct. Then there will be no escape for you from the suffering of the lower realms. This is not the Buddha playing God and threatening you to behave. If you don't behave, you're going to burn in hell. It might sometimes sound like the same thing, but the rationale, right, is completely different. Yeah? The Buddha said, you create your own suffering and happiness. Reality is not a given. Each of us are unfolding our realities. So if we don't consider, if we don't relate to this disciplined conduct, whether it's the 5 basic lay vows that we should observe, or the more detailed layers of vows, all the way to the vows of a fully ordained nun, in the most maximum security, so to say. So when we think of the vows as maximum, as security, right? As disciplined conduct, these vows, these precepts, as security, then yes, sometimes it can turn into your prison. If you don't know how to observe them, it can turn into a prison. But if you know how to observe them and work with them, then it's security. It's preventing you from creating suffering for yourself and for others. So it's maximum protection. I remember years ago when my parents came to visit me for the first time, and my aunt also came, and my mom was, especially my mom, my dad probably, but didn't say out loud, but my mom was rather distressed by the fact that nobody, well, she didn't really care about other people. I didn't lock my house doors. And then especially, when it's time to go to bed, she's like, no, we need to lock that door. I say, okay. And so she was, yeah. And I was, being the son that I was, of course I purposely didn't lock anything. Just to be rebellious, never mind how old, and still that kid never goes away. Anyway, so it was a point of contention. So later when my aunt went back, and during our family gathering, would bring this up, and she found it amusing. She's like, meanwhile, I think she was telling her kids, meanwhile, your aunt, was really concerned about the door not being locked, and then your cousin kept saying, don't lock the door, don't lock the door. And then I remember my aunt said, my cousin, her son said, have you all considered that perhaps he was more concerned about being locked in than locking out bad things? I thought, I wonder, he might be onto something. More concerned about being locked in. And in that particular case, being locked in by mom telling the child, you have to do this for your safety. and rebelling against being locked in, right? So when we train, observe, take these vows of disciplined conduct, we want to be careful that we don't do it in a way that you see it as, this is just, but we really need to see that this is really the best thing we can do for ourselves is to protect ourselves, So in that sense, right, we also take it out of the realm of morality. Yeah? Definitely they are not immoral. That much I can say, But if we observe them from more the perspective of morality, then there's always this danger of developing knowingly or unknowingly this, self-righteousness and holier than thou. But if instead we go at them, we observe them from the perspective and appreciation of this really is going to keep me from harming myself, then we will observe this differently, Therefore, the higher training of disciplined conduct, which is virtuous in the beginning, middle, and end, should be guarded like your very own life and eyes. Our eyes, Even though guarding disciplined conduct results in attaining the states of gods and humans, these are still within samsara. So guarding disciplined conduct can assure that we will be protected from being born in the lower realms. So being born in the lower realms after this human life, and also being born in the lower realms right now, even carrying a human body. Right? You don't need to discard this body to be chucked into one of these lower realms while walking around like a human. So guarding this disciplined conduct results in attaining states of gods and humans, meaning freedom, relative freedom. Gods have a lot of freedom. Mostly walk up and down Haywood on any given day, it's basically God realm. It's basically God realm of different types, because people are kind of leisurely, I'm always wondering, don't they have to work? I'm sure other people are sitting there looking at me. Don't they have to work? So I don't know, who's working here, but seems like God realm, So that's what we mean, like God as in pretty free, So disciplined conduct can create an environment of the God realms and the human realm. Which is true, I think even though, we, complain about Americans, ... so materialistic, ... so capitalistic, ... right? I've lived, I've traveled, I've spent time in many places. But I can say that by and large, people do have disciplined conduct here. And therefore, for the most part, it's a human and God realm. Really, because people have this sense of being disciplined. People have a civic sense. Relative, people do. So that, for example, if I'm driving, along the roads here, somebody throws something out, it's such a shocking thing, It's like someone has thrown a baby out the window. In many parts of the world, if you're shocked, you're crazy. Because people just chuck whatever they want to chuck out the window. think, yeah, someone will take care of that. Not here, you know. So we have these states, but these are still within samsara, the ocean of suffering. So there's still suffering here. That's the main point. But as well to say, you know, yeah, you can see, you know, like generally it's pretty good. But the point here is, don't be fooled by pretty good. Because the God realm existence is going to end. The human realm existence is going to end. And then you don't know where you will go. Conditions can change. So these are still within samsara, the ocean of suffering. If you do not recognize samsara as suffering, the wish to abandon it will never arise. So that's why all these teachings to talk about that point us in the direction of, want us to see how the way we are existing now, the mode of existence we are in now, is samsaric. If we don't see samsara, if we don't see samsara by definition is suffering, then the wish to abandon it will never arise. Now, you may say, actually, I don't think it's that bad. Well, congratulations. Somehow. Either you have solved the problem or you are so expert at fooling yourself. Either way, things are good for now. Maybe forever, who knows? But if you have a suspicion, you know, that this is samsara, then you should pursue that and see it. And then, so then the wish to abandon it will arise. So give up admiration for samsara and accomplish freedom. So liberation, freedom. So that means samsara is where there is no freedom. Where there's no freedom. Tasting the flavor of the peace of liberation and nirvana for yourself alone without thinking about others is the way of Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhists. So I request you to abandon these attitudes of the lower vehicles. So he says, then next, not just for yourself. Yeah. Now, a big footnote here, right? This should not be translated to, oh, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhists, they're not worth our admiration. Elsewhere, Jiten Sungun talks in glowing terms about how wonderful the Shravaka disciples are, how Pratyeka Buddhists, how we need to recognize that these are sublime beings. It's just here, within the context of the Bodhisattva path, is saying even something as marvelous as the freedom that Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas can get, don't limit your goal to that. Seek a bigger goal. So I request you to abandon these attitudes of the lower vehicles. So when we get teachings like this, when we read about these, you know, not even a little bit should we think about, oh, this is talking about those Buddhists over there, or those Buddhists over there. Or maybe some of you might even get like anguished by the fact that you think it's talking about those Buddhists over there. But I like them, they're so nice. Why are you saying they're not? They are lower vehicles. No, it's not talking about other people, much less talking about, you know, this or that tradition of Buddhism. It's talking about you, yourself. don't settle for merely personal freedom. Don't only settle for. Let's cut to simple terms, the ones that we really face on a day-to-day basis, right? I mean, truthfully, how many of us like suddenly stop doing whatever we're doing and going, oh, is this for the sake of all beings or for the sake of me? I don't know how often you actually stop and think and go, oh, I need to think about the sake of all beings, right? So let's just put it in terms that we do. Yes?
I'm not sure if this is exactly on the right path.
Uh-huh.
Can you just say, in talking about other types of Buddhism, do they all have the Bodhisattva vow, or is that specific?
Oh, so the question about other forms of Buddhism, do they have the Bodhisattva vow? Some traditions emphasize it explicitly and some don't. For example, in the Theravada tradition, it's not repeated ad nauseum. In the Tibetan tradition, it's repeated ad nauseum. To no end. In Chinese Korean, which is all part of Mahayana, which clearly Bodhisattva vow is at the center of that as well, they don't like day in, day out, Bodhisattva vow, Bodhisattva vow, Bodhicitta, Bodhicitta.
They do or don't?
They don't. Yeah, they don't. Now you could say they don't because, well, they don't emphasize it so much compared to the Tibetans, right? You could say that. Let me play Mara's advocate. Maybe sometimes you have to wonder, why are these people continuously talking about you need to think about others?
Because they don't.
Because they don't. Perhaps, again, not to criticize, just to say, there's always, worth thinking about. I wonder why they keep talking about this.
It does too much.
Yeah, like every single teaching you will ever attend, especially if it is a, traditionally trained Lama, without fail, they always start everything with. And so you have to begin by thinking about others and do this for the sake of others, la 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 la, and then they will start. No matter what they're teaching, it's like they start with that. Frankly, sometimes I wonder, are they still hearing this or it's just habit? And what kind of habit is this, Now, I can say that I think it has something to do with the fact that, so equally, right, across Northern Asia, basically, you can kind of divide geographically. Southern Asia is where the Theravada tradition dominates traditionally. Northern Asia is the area where Mahayana Buddhism dominates. Then within Mahayana, there is a further category of the Vajrayana. Vajrayana is really like within the Mahayana family. So then all Mahayana traditions emphasize Bodhisattva path, the vow to become Bodhisattva, the vow to become Buddha for the benefit of all beings, right? So then, like I said, like on the eastern side of North Asia, they don't, repeat again and again and again and again and again and again, right? In contrast to Himalayan Tibetan. Right? Another way to think about why may have to do with the degree that Vajrayana materials dominate Himalayan and, Tibetan Mahayana. There are Vajrayana elements in East Asia, but they are not center staged. Whereas in the Himalayan Tibetan context, Vajrayana assumes center stage. And with that, because of the way Vajrayana talks, people need to be constantly reminded what this is for. Because there are many Vajrayana elements that if you don't have the right context, it's just a practice of dominance, power, and sorcery. Wrathful deities, Dharma protectors, I'm going to launch my Dharma protector rocket, to your village, and then, your village would launch another one back and see who gets destroyed first and stuff like that. Which historically, Tibetans have done that. Which is my way of saying they are real people. They don't live in a Humpty Dumpty world. I've previously said, life in that altitude is really rough. Resources are very limited. People are constantly competing to stay alive, So I think the prevalence and the dominance of Vajrayana material, you need to balance that out with constantly, please, bodhicitta, please don't forget bodhicitta, please don't forget bodhicitta. I mean, like the topic of the retreat this weekend, Singhamukha. Eesh. Right? It's one thing to live in Asheville and imagine I'm Singhamukha. And another thing, right, to be in the war zone and I'm Singhamukha. Or just not war zone, in the wrong turn of the road in New York City, suddenly, to visualize myself as Singhamukha has a very different meaning, that can slip into, here comes my chopper, chop, chop, chop,
But the Theravada tradition has bodhicitta, they just don't.
Theravada tradition, that word don't even turn up.
They don't,
Yeah.
so they're not practicing for the benefit of others, even though.
I don't know.
They don't?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
All I can say is bodhicitta doesn't figure in their vocabulary. Are they practicing for others? I don't know. Are we practicing for others? I don't know. I can only say that we talk about bodhicitta a lot. Are we practicing for others? That's something you need to answer for yourself. I need to answer for myself. Every one of you need to answer for yourself.
I wonder if a related element to the focus on bodhicitta is in the Tibetan tradition the usage of the native religions, the bone imagery and techniques, and so it's that reminder that hey, this is similar to what you've done before, but here's the aspect that we're focusing on.
Yeah, John, in case those of you out there can't hear, John said, does it maybe have something to do with the Bon tradition? No, I don't think so. This is just Buddhists, giving Bon a bad name. We practically don't know what religion was like before Buddhism arrived. All the records we have is like what Buddhists said religion was like before Buddhists arrived. In a very similar way, we have no idea pre-Islamic Arabia what religion was like. Everything that we have comes from Muslim accounts. And necessarily it paints a particular picture to kind of explain why, right, Buddhism has a right now to be in Tibet. Right? You can't exactly say everything was hunky-dory, people hugged each other, but we need Buddhism. Right? So Buddhists would tell you what Tibet was like before Buddhism. But we don't really know. But what we do know, before or after Buddhism, is life was very challenging. Resources are very limited. One bad hailstorm, And whatever little that you're able to plant that you were counting on, not for surplus, but to tie you to the next wind, to the next spring. Finish. Now you have to go invade someone. Really. Not really out of greed, out of survival. Let's go bag. If we can't bag, let's go rob, because we don't have anything, you know. Yeah, so I don't think it's so much. But in fact, I don't know if they have such fearsome deities. Like, look at the Tantras, which is Indic, you know.
Right.
Yeesh.
Yeah.
Anyway. So I request you to abandon these attitudes of the lower vehicles, generate supreme bodhicitta with thoughts of love and compassion for all sentient beings of the six realms, and sincerely endeavor to practice the trainings of aspiration and engagement bodhicitta. After having generated supreme bodhicitta, take up the practice of the six perfections. And so this is all the necessary foundation that we need to have. And then he enters to attain perfect awakening by means of immeasurable hardships for 3 countless eons and so on is an extremely long and difficult path. So as for this task of becoming Buddha, it's a very long and difficult one. But, maybe not hence, Buddhahood can be attained in this life through the Vajra vehicle of secret mantra. So there is one category of the Buddha's teachings that can make it all happen in one lifetime. This was taught by Vajradhara, and this you should follow. In the secluded, delightful abode, request the 4 empowerments, which is the process of ripening. Whenever we see the word path, right, you can substitute it with process. Sometimes path sounds so exotic. I'm on the path. Process. The process of ripening, meaning the process of maturing your potential. So that's the purpose of empowerment. And every empowerment, whether explicitly or implicitly, has what's known as the 4 empowerments. And this is the vase empowerment, secret empowerment, the wisdom knowledge empowerment, and the precious word empowerment. These are the 4. So it says, request the 4 empowerments, which is the precious process of maturing your potential, ripening your abilities from an authentic and sublime guru. Having abandoned the faults and defects of your samayas, your commitments, sit cross-legged on a comfortable seat in a very remote and secluded place. Having performed all the preliminary branches to meditative concentration, that means learn how to stabilize your mind. Make it even, make it stable. So you need to train in that first. Then again, recall impermanence and samsara's defect. Train your mind in love, compassion, and bodhicitta. Then practice the creation and completion stages of deity yoga. Although the creation and completion stages with characteristics are the cause for the 2 form kayas, they will not bring about ultimate dharmakaya. Hence, the supreme path of all victors throughout the 3 times, which was practiced by the Mahasiddhas of bygone times, and is the life essence of Viras and Dakinis, is Mahāmudrā, which is the mind itself, training in the mind itself. And so here is called Mahāmudrā. You can also refer to it as completion stage without signs. Completion stage with signs, with characteristics, are talking about the subtle body practices, moving of the energy, the inner heat, powa, things like this. But it says that all those practices, at best, creation stage, yourself as a deity, like all those things, at best, only give rise to the Nirmanakaya and the Sambhogakaya. At best. Now, of course, actually, the truth is, if the Dharmakaya is not actualized, no way Nirmanakaya or Sambhogakaya can turn up. Yeah? So it's just rhetorically, he's saying. At best, if somehow you can avoid or not practice at all Mahāmudrā, and only do the other things, at best you only have the other two kayas. You don't have Dharmakaya. But in fact, it's impossible. Without actualizing Dharmakaya, these two other kayas cannot arise. Yeah? Just for emphasis, he says this. The completion stages, the most famous ones, are called the 6 yogas or the 6 dharmas of Naropa. And in the Buddhist magazine, Buddha Dharma, the latest issue, is all on the 6 dharmas of Naropa. The whole issue is on 6 dharmas of Naropa. And then there's the print issue, and then there's also the the online additional stuff. So I have a short article on the online, the electronic addendum, I suppose, to the main ones. Perhaps other than the fact that, I'm not in the main one, I can also say that I'm a little troubled by this edition. I think on the one hand it's good, people read about it and people feel like, ooh, wow, ooh, wow, right? I'm troubled by them because I think the writers make it sound like it's something you can do on a weekend. It's one thing to do, Civil War reenactions, and another thing to be actually in the Civil War. And I'm afraid that people who read this will think that they are in the Civil War. And it's not so concerning if there weren't actually people now stuck in the Civil War, so to say. Yeah. And then here we are sort of self-congratulatory, I can be a CEO and do dream yoga. And we're doing it right. We have no idea, the profundity of these practices. So that's what I'm a little kind of. I even hesitate to write what I wrote. Mine has nothing about how you can practice it too. I was asked to write, I said, I don't want to write about any of those 6. In any case, I don't know much about them, so I don't want to write anything about them. But I would write a history, kind of an account of how, this came about. I can tell you that in the digital exclusives, they also have an interview, which you can read. I wanted to send you guys that. You can go look for it. It's called The Future of Vajrayana Buddhism. This was the original title. It's an interview with 3 American lamas, with the editor of Buddha Dharma. After I read that, I wrote Buddha Dharma. I said, yeah, they're very insightful, and they're clearly people who have for many years been very dedicated students of these practices, and now they are teachers of it. And I said, it's all good, but I have one complaint to register. I said, maybe the future of Vajrayana Buddhism in the West at most. Please don't talk as if you're speaking about Vajrayana Buddhism, its future. Even in terms of numbers, 99% of the people practicing Vajrayana are not in the West. And I said, and all these people, many of them live in caves and shacks. And many of them are living under governments that consider what they do as subversive, constantly trying to shut them down. They are being persecuted. Nonetheless, they practice. None of these 99% of Vajrayana practitioners would recognize what you are talking about. Let's not call this a conversation about the future of Vajrayana. I said, this is like the Vajrayana Global North, speaking on behalf of the Vajrayana world. To their credit, immediately they're like, sorry, you're absolutely right. So they changed the title to In the West. I said, okay, if you want to say In the West, that's fine. Even though I'm in the West, I don't know if I agree with what you say, but that's okay. We're not here to fight. We all have to die, so no more time for that. I did consider whether it's time or not, whether I want to spend the time writing this email or not. But I was like, okay, let me start a little fight. Thankfully, they didn't want to fight. And they said, yes, you're absolutely right. Whew, we missed this whole... And it's easy, like they're well-meaning, for sure. I mean, these are my friends, actually. I know them, And they're well-meaning, but we can be so wrapped up in our own, and be self-congratulatory and say, oh, Vajrayana is so conducive to modern people. Really?
So confusing, is that what you said?
So appropriate for modern people. Like, well, again, majority of Vajrayana practitioners don't live like us. What about them, Where are their voices? And I even fault, like, the lamas who, in the sense of like giving the impression that even they can speak for all these nameless. In fact, I feel that, the real holders of Vajrayana are people not known to us. Because by design, they don't want us to know them. They're quietly in caves, in shacks, in the forest, holding the essence. So some humility, I think, is good. Anyway, hence the supreme path of the victors throughout the 3 times, which was practiced by the Mahasiddhas of bygone times and is the life essence of the Viras, the heroes, and the Dakinis, is Mahāmudrā, mind itself. Furthermore, the Tantra of Vajrakesha says, through meditating on the mind as Supreme Buddha, one awakens as a Buddha in this lifetime. For there is no Buddha or sentient being apart from this precious mind. This has been taught by Vajradhara. This mind itself. So there is secret mantra with all its complexities, right? And even its like fierce, horrific images, wrathful, all of that. Yes, yes, yes. But here, this is the essence. And the essence actually is the mind itself. We need to know what is mind. And there's a lot to discover about this topic before we get to like the nature of mind. Again, often, we too eagerly want to know nature of mind. Before we get to nature of mind, do you know how your monkey mind works right now?
I always called it the body's pattern recognition system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But we have to develop, right? Like even body, we are so unaware of that which animates the body. Meaning what's underneath the skin, so to say, what's underneath the bones, what's underneath the blood, which is a body of energy that directly connects with our emotions. And in part is like our current conditions, Our current conditions takes us away from having a natural awareness and connection to the body, where body and mind are much more together and not at odds. Because it was needed for survival. But now, because we have created gadgets and we put our trust in gadgets to protect us, we have kind of disconnected with this what underlies this, So even just sitting, just at the point of sit down, here like page 8, middle of on the right column, having performed all the preliminary branches to meditative concentration, right? In order for meditative concentration to develop, first the body has to settle into a quiet space. Now, as the body settles into the quiet, how do you help body to settle? By relating to the elements. So we talk about the 5 elements. In fact, 4 elements plus space. Space is not necessarily, technically not an element. Space is that which allows the elements. So we need to kind of tune into what are these elements in the context of this body. So So there are positive and negative aspects to these elements in the body. The positive of the earth element is when the body is like, they say, like Mount Meru, unshakable. The negative is when it's like, it's heavy. You know, you feel sluggish. That's when the earth element has gone into a negative, manifesting as a negative. When it manifests as a positive, the earth element allows the body to be unmoving, like Mount Meru. So that's earth. Right? Then water. Water element is basically coming together, holding things together. Holding things together. That part of this body that gathers things in, that holds things together. I mean, when you look at the shape of a drop of water, right? It has its own kind of power to pull in. Yeah, so when we talk about water element, we're talking about that natural ability. And then again, this water, then when it loses that, then it goes. Fire is vitality, digestion, all of that. Wind is motility, flexibility. So in positive is when it's flexible. When it's disease, so to say, right? Then it's all over the place. Even in our speech expressions, right? Like solid like a rock, you know. All over the place. Right? So these are those elements in our bodies that we are so unaware of. And they're directly connected to our mental emotional states. Not so much always one pushing the other, but they influence each other. Sometimes you can intervene from the more energetic side. Sometimes you can intervene more on the mental emotional side. It varies. It's not fixed. And we have to learn. How do we learn? Pay attention. We have to pay attention to when we intervene by doing things to shift the energy, so to say, and when we try to move, change this, intervene by shifting the mind. So there's this interdependence. And so these are also the more kind of subtle practice related to Amitayus. The calling of the vital life force, the calling of the life vitality of the five elements. This is all very much related to Amitayus. So Amitayus, yes, of course, like a sadhana, you think, oh, you perform the sadhana, you chant the mantras, you accumulate this much, that much. Unless, you begin to see how actually it's part and parcel. And that's why also, in the context of like Amitayus practice as a preliminary to the fivefold Mahāmudrā path, or in our case, the Ladrup, accomplishing the Guru system of training. Why you begin with Amitayus is more than just, so that you don't die before you finish. But that's the common answer given. That's also, frankly, that's how I think most Tibetan teachers will teach it. But it's not just about that. In fact, it's an important preliminary. So it's calling our attention, skillful attention, to paying attention to this body and the vital energies related to this body. This is Asheville. There's a lot of obsession over body as well. So we need to balance that out. So skillful engagement with learning about the vital energies and how these vital energies, this life vitality, relates to the kleshas. So this is all part of the preliminary. So the mantra recitation, the visualization, they work really well if we're able to make this connection. Otherwise, at most, as they say, you gain some merit from chanting the mantra. But no real shift will happen. But if we're able to make that connection and keep that connection, and then when we practice Amitayus, then the method can trigger the effect of becoming more aware, more alert to how the elements are affecting the mind, the minds are modifying the elements, and how that then manifests to our physical, mental, emotional well-being. So it's cultivating a power of mental, emotional well-being. Before then, formally, 4 thoughts that turn the mind. It's the next set of preliminaries. The common preliminaries. Then the uncommon preliminaries. So this Amitayus practice then supports by building up a strong and stable both physical and mental emotional states. So that when you actually sit, so to say, right, for Mahāmudrā, when you actually sit, you know how to sit.